Hi everyone, Ben here. I am super excited for this next project that we are working on. After WBC happens, videos go online and they're super useful and super helpful. One of my favorite things that's happened the past year is that WCE has often had commentators that sort of break down the competitions and tell you what's important or how the competitions are going, what makes that competitor unique. These are some of my favorite parts of WBC. I think they're really useful and really helpful. And so what we wanted to do is also contribute and go through some videos. When WBC is over, I basically talk about it for the next year until the next one starts. So I thought I might as well spend some of that energy and break down some comp videos. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go through a whole bunch of different barista competitors and we're gonna approach it from many different ways. We will try and highlight things for people that have never really watched a barista competition before, like what makes this set unique or what's special about it. We'll try and have some tips for competitors that are looking to compete at the Worlds, what made a routine strong or weak. And then hopefully, because I'm so old, I can give you some old gems of things that have changed in the competition, little tidbits that I think are interesting and maybe you do and maybe you don't. I think one of the most important things about barista competitions that we often miss is that the winners, we assume that they did everything right to get there. And I think by going through the videos and actually commentating on them, we can focus on at least what I think made that presentation strong or weak, and then we can start to break it down. I also think it's really important to note that just because the people in the top 6 are there, it doesn't mean that those other presentations that were at Worlds didn't have great content. So as we go along, we're even gonna look at some videos that maybe didn't make finals or didn't make semis to show just the amazing level of barista that is at WBC and try and highlight some of the presentations that you might not have seen that are actually really special. We decided to start with the man that did it all last year, Anthony Douglas. He has an amazing presentation. He won, so you know that he did a bunch of stuff right. And you know, if he made a mistake, it's easier to pick on him because he won. So let's get started.
Time. I want you to cast your mind back to the last time that you had a coffee experience that was exactly as the barista described. Now, we all know how good moments like this feel. The reason why they feel so good is because of trust. Every time we create an expectation, we're making a promise. When we deliver upon the expectation, we're keeping that promise. This builds trust in any relationship. Now, I know you all love specialty coffee, and if we want to see this industry thrive, we need trust. Trust allows us to connect specialty coffee to the cafe customer, and if we want to keep them there, we need them to be engaged, learning and understanding more about coffee quality. In order for a customer to really appreciate coffee quality, there needs to be an understanding of the decisions made by the barista and how these reflect the passion and the hard work of both producer, roaster, and how this all translates to the final experience in the cup. Now, over the past months leading up until this routine, I've explored every variable I can imagine, and the decisions I've made will be the focus of the next 15 minutes. Now, all the key information is on the placemats in front of you, so sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Starting with the coffee. For all 3 courses.
So on this intro, I think it's an amazing intro. It is very engaging. He's very quick. If you watch his movements, he's straight into making coffee. I think this is a trend that has changed over the past couple of years, that people have shorter intros. We're about just over a minute here, about a minute 10, minute 15. In that shorter intro, it gives you more time to do things later on. And he also went straight into it. He also did some really interesting stuff. You can see that he actually has a 4th portafilter handle on stage. Technically, if you use that portafilter handle, that would be breaking the rules because you are not allowed to change any part on the espresso machine. So if you put in a different basket, different handle, anything like that, you would lose points. But what he's done that's really interesting is he's actually just used that to purge his grinder. It made it really fast. He empties it. He doesn't have to clean out a portafilter again. He doesn't have to hold the cup underneath there again. So it's actually really interesting. You can also see he has some new tools that we'll discuss in a moment that he also talks about as well.
You'll be drinking an anaerobic natural sidra produced by Nestor Lasso on his farm, El Diviso, in the region of Huila, Colombia. Now today, I'll be highlighting 4 key decisions, 2 represented on the signature drink box to your right, and 2 on the signature drink box to your left. My goal in sharing these decisions and their impact is building layers of trust.
So it looks like he's about to do his milk course. You can see from his display, the way he has the table set up, It puts him right in the center, and he's allowed to have 2 sort of displays for his signature drink right on the side. So it's really engaging to the public. One thing that I just wanted to comment, this is sort of like an old tidbit. Right now he is pulling all 4 of his shots for what looks like to be his milk course. This was actually considered bad as recent as 2012. A barista competitor from Ireland named Colin Harmon was one of the first ones that I know of that pulled all 4 shots at once. It used to be considered that the coffee would die if you left it too long before you pull the milk. So even though this seems like a really basic thing, it is, in terms of the history of coffee, it is a recent thing to be able to do this. And I think we all owe a bit of a thank you to Colin to sort of not caring what people thought and actually going for it and doing it.
Together, over the next 15 minutes, we'll be building layers of your signature drink, linking the key decisions made to the ingredients used and the flavors you'll experience in the cup. Now, purposefully split the drink into 2 components because we'll be highlighting different elements of El Diviso, and we'll bring them together later on at the end.
So again, lots of different tools on stage. If you watch when he distributes in tamps, he actually has multiple tools. So he has a distribution tool that is quite new. It has a bunch of needles that spin in there. That basically gives you a more even distribution of coffee within the basket. It's going to improve your extraction. It also levels your bed, because nowadays everyone has a distribution tool that gives you a more level bed. It's for scoring tech, but they've taken that a level even higher in that they want to see that bed level before you even use that distribution tool. So by Anthony using that additional distribution tool, he's getting better extraction, but he's also getting higher tech because he set that bed up. It's super level before he puts that second tool on top. You can also see he has a modified tamper. It's a tamper that keeps everything level. Most competitors are doing that right now. They're easy points that I think everyone should be looking to get, but it requires sort of some planning and figuring out really what's going on with the tech. As he was talking, you could see he took his milk. It was in a clever dripper, or a dripper that basically has a valve on the bottom that he can place right on top of his steaming pitcher. So he's saving so much time in these little tiny ways where it's like, I'm talking in this moment, but you don't even see, it's almost sleight of hand that I'm moving things to where they need to be. So it makes a really natural and warm presentation where you're so engaged with his presentation that you don't even know that he's doing other things as he competes.
Now, just as I'm asking you to trust in me, I've specifically chosen to work with Nestor because I trust in him, his experience as a producer, and the decisions that he's made that have better allowed me to deliver upon my promise to you of what you'll experience in each course. So our first key decision was Nestor's, to ferment this coffee for 80 hours anaerobically. This led to higher concentrations of organic acids, bigger, definable flavors, which I find directly improves the accuracy of flavor for your espresso course. So I'll get you to please slide down to the signature drink section of the score sheet, because we're going to be representing this decision by adding 5 grams of lacto-fermented passion fruit. Now, I prepared this by combining 1 part passion fruit with 1% salt and fermenting at room temperature for 5 days. I chose passion fruit because it has a vibrant citric acidity that pairs really well with El Diviso, and in your signature course, this will create a new flavor note of plum, if you'll please write that down.
So you can see that throughout this presentation, Anthony is going to introduce different parts of his signature drink during the presentation. This is the best version of this style that I've seen. It has benefits and drawbacks. So one of the benefits of it is you introduce that material slowly so the judge can get it, they can write it down. I think often in barista competitions, they're so rushed at the end that you're trying to fit a lot of content into that last course, and so it can often get lost. It also lets him put up those materials early on so the judges can reference them while it's going on. The thing that makes it hard is it sort of breaks up the presentation, and so the judges have to move around the score sheet. But Anthony's done a good job in guiding them where they need to be at each moment. You can tell that this was planned and thought about a lot. You cannot execute something like this just on a whim because you have to know where all those time markers fit up.
Now, turning your attention to the espresso course. In your espresso, you'll be tasting flavor notes of blackberry, cherry, and red wine. The tactile will be a medium weight. It'll have a juicy texture and a long, lingering red wine tannin finish. Now, flavor calls are a key component of trust. If something were to happen with my extraction, the experience wouldn't match the expectations. So to ensure that I can deliver upon my promises today, I chose the wheat distribution technique. So the needles of this wheat tool are spaced so they cover the entire surface area of the basket with one spin of this handle. Now with multiple spins, the grinds distribute themselves evenly from top to bottom and side to side. All of this leads to a more even and dependable extraction so that I know that that flavor note of blackberry is both in the espresso and it tastes really good. So please slide down to the signature drink section of your score sheet once again, because we're going to represent this decision by adding 5 grams of Colombian honey, produced by the bees on the farm. Now I chose this honey because it has a complexity that reminds me of El Diviso, and in your signature drink, that's going to create a flavor note of sultana, which you might also know as golden raisin. Now on the placemat in front of you, you'll see a purple aromatic disc. When I serve you the espresso, I'll ask you to please assess the crema and place the disc directly on top of the cup. We're going to let your espresso cool to 50 degrees, which will really highlight that flavor note of blackberry. And in the meantime, the aroma disc is going to capture all of those volatile aromatics, giving more prominence to the flavor notes I've just given you. Now, whilst these are extracting, let's introduce our third key decision.
So a lot going on in this part. You can see that he's pulling 3 handles right now. He's pulling some shots for his signature drink. This is a common technique. It gives you some speed. It lets you use all 3 handles. It's super smart. It will save you lots of time. It's trying to figure out how that flows though, because just because you save time somewhere else doesn't necessarily mean the flow is better. He did something that I really love, where he brought the portafilter handles over to the table to show them how he is using that Weiss distribution technique. There might be someone that did it earlier. I attribute this to actually Cole Tarot from Canada. He was one of the first people I remember that had a little board just to move the portafilters over. I think it's a really nice technique. It gives you more face time with the judges. It's kind of risky, so there's a bit of showmanship to it. I think it's a really nice technique, a good way to connect with judges. So I think that's just absolutely awesome and super smart for Anthony.
In order to refine those beautiful red wine tannins that you're about to experience, my roaster and I finished the roast at an end temperature, just 2 degrees higher than first crack. This resulted in lighter external colors, and from here, we extended the post-first crack development to 24%, ensuring solubility and sweetness. So just assessing the crema and placing that purple disc on top. Thank you. There we go. Cheers. Here we go. Thanks. Now I'll get you to slide down to the signature drink section of the score sheet once again.
So that purple disc that he puts on is actually really interesting. So when the judges get served the espresso, they're putting basically like a plexiglass disc on top of the espresso. And I think, in my opinion, often the presentations that do well at Worlds, in that top 6, there's kind of a zeitgeist or a common theme that everyone has landed on. Not everyone has, but it's often like a common thing where something new in the industry, multiple competitors are working on. And so I would say distribution tools, there are lots of them this year. But both myself and Anthony did things where the espresso was covered in some way that it was exposed to less oxygen. So for me, I put it in a syringe. Anthony's placing that disc on top. You could argue that it is exposing the coffee to less oxygen. The other thing that it might be doing is another common technique that was used this year, which is compound chilling, where basically you cool things down. It means that if the thing is cooler, it's releasing less volatile aromatics. So those volatile aromatics are preserved in the cup. So when you drink them, you have a more complex cup. It's possible that ceramic disc, as those volatile aromatics come up, they're condensing on the disc and coming back down. So it might be giving you a more aromatic espresso. Regardless, I think it's interesting to have something where the judge is involved somehow in physically moving things. I think it's a nice touch to get them involved. It also makes your course a bit more memorable for the judges, which I think as time goes on throughout each round, that becomes important because it sort of creates a bit of movement and energy in your presentation.
Because we're going to add complexity to those tannins that we've highlighted through this decision by adding 5 grams of cold brewed hibiscus tea. Now, I prepared this by combining 1 part hibiscus with 15 parts water and brewing for 12 hours at 4 degrees. I chose hibiscus because it has wine-like tannins reminiscent of your espresso, and in your signature drink, that's going to create a flavor note of cranberry. Now, in a moment, I'll ask you to enjoy your espresso. When I do, please place the aroma disc to the side of the cup, stir, placing your spoons in the silver cup, and enjoy across 2 sips. So go ahead and enjoy.
So he's made another element of his signature drink. There's another interesting sort of strategic thing here where you want your presentation to have a theme, and that theme connects through all 3 courses. And this is one of the most difficult things, to make that theme connect to espresso, to milk, to signature drink. What Anthony's doing here is by serving or introducing a signature drink element for each course and connecting it to that course, he's running it back through as well. So it's not just talking about trust in each course. He's also saying, here's trust, here's what I did, but also here's how it relates to the signature drink. So he's actually tied his presentation together even more so than most people do. It's all sort of deeply rooted there. I did not try Anthony's signature drink, but I think there's something sort of clever here that I've seen a lot of competitors do, is where you use an ingredient that kind of tastes like another ingredient. So for example, he's using hibiscus tea. He says the note that comes out is cranberry. To me, hibiscus is often used as a floral note, but when you really taste it, it is sort of a tart fruit note. So I think that Anthony is doing something really smart here in using an ingredient that sort of has other notes to it. It's well within the rules. I think it's a really good play, and I think that more competitors should look for ingredients that kind of taste like other things. One small thing that Anthony did that I love, because when people do something else, it always bothers me. In barista competitions, often there's grounds on the counter, and what they do is they just sweep it onto the floor. And the tech judges tell you that they catch that and they take those points off. I've never seen it come off a score sheet. So Anthony actually taking a bucket and sweeping it into a grounds bin, it doesn't look like much, but that is like massive attention to detail, because typically, just watch for this, people just sweep it onto the ground.
So now, we're going to move on to your milk course. So I'll get you to please write this down. In your milk course, you'll experience flavor notes of cherry, butterscotch, and chocolate mousse.
So he gave 3 tasting notes. We'll see if he gives some tactile notes as well here. One of the things that's really important for milk courses is that you have a harmonious blend between the taste of the milk and the taste of that particular coffee. So Anthony's done something smart by serving the espresso first. The judges have a good idea what that flavor profile is, and so they know how things will interact. But even when you are, for any competitors that are going to be making flavor calls on drinks, you need to make sure that your tasting notes represent the fact that you have both coffee and milk in there. So he said cherry, I think butterscotch and chocolate. Cherry milk does not taste like cherry, so that is clearly coming from the coffee. Butterscotch could be milk, it could go either way, and then chocolate is usually a coffee note. So he's in good shape where you have one clear coffee note, you have chocolate, which I've tasted in both as the result of milk and the result of coffee, so that's kind of halfway in between. And then you have butterscotch, which is often comes out of many coffees when they're combined with milk. So even something as small as that you don't notice can have a big impact on scores, because if a judge gets only tasting notes that are related to the coffee or only related to the milk, for milk, for example, if you call like vanilla ice cream, caramel, and like marshmallow, you just serve someone a big cup of milk. And so Anthony's really smart here too, where he knows how to build drinks that are harmonious and taste good. And even just knowing that, I know that that drink tasted good and scored well.
So now I'd like to share with you some of the decisions that I've made to deliver upon those descriptors through milk. Now, after a lot of fine tuning, I found that by steaming the milk to 55 degrees and serving it at 50 degrees in the cup, we're going to really highlight that flavor note of cherry. And now, I am so excited to introduce to all of you the fourth key decision, milk cryodesiccation. So how it works is I've placed frozen milk into a chamber, I've reduced the pressure, creating a vacuum, while supplying a gentle heat over the course of 24 hours. Now, this combination of lower pressure and heat caused the frozen water in that milk to turn directly into a vapor, leaving behind a powder of milk concentrated by 900%. So I've left some of that in front of each of you if you'd like to have a look. Enjoy. From here, I've recombined 30 grams of that powder with 300 grams of the original milk I froze. This doubled the concentration of sugars, fats, and proteins in the milk, directly improving the taste experience and the texture of the drink, whilst lifting up those beautiful qualities of El Diviso. All right, enjoy. Now, I found this was best expressed in an extraction of 22.5 grams in, 38 grams out, in 28 seconds. And I've combined this with 90 grams of this delicious cryo-desiccated milk. All yours. Enjoy. Thank you. Now, as you may have noticed, I've been leaving these extractions to cool throughout the routine. I've done this because it highlights the acidity in El Diviso, really helping lift up that beautiful flavor note of cherry that you're about to taste. Perfect. Enjoy. There you go.
So this was one of the big things that Anthony innovated this year, was that cryo-desiccated milk. It's basically freeze-dried milk that he's adding, so to give you a more concentrated flavor of basically the fats, the sugars, all the stuff that makes milk taste delicious. This is sort of, I would say, building on the freeze distillation technique, taking it in a different direction. So freeze distillation basically separates things. You freeze the milk, you slowly thaw it, and what happens is there are different melting points for all the different compounds in milk. So some of the first things that leave are sugars and salt, and what you usually end up with freeze distilled milk, once it's dripped through, is you have a salty and sweet milk that has more intensity and has basically taken over the competition scene. Most competitors are using some amount of freeze distilled milk, whether or not they're saying it. So Anthony, by doing cryodesiccated milk, that salt, I think, is where his advantage lies, is that salt is the first thing that comes out, and that's usually what competitors are battling. If you watch competitors compete, often salted caramel is a call. This is totally my opinion, but in my opinion, a salted caramel call probably means you have a bit too much salt in your drink. So by Anthony just concentrating everything, it's just giving him a punchier, more intense milk flavor. So I think it's really smart, it's really cool, it's probably a completely new experience for the judges. And by doing it himself, I think it's probably a higher quality, because you can buy powdered milk. I've tried it in drinks before. It didn't really add the sweetness and the character that I wanted. By Anthony doing it on his own, I think he had a greater control over what milk went into that freeze-dry process. because I have to imagine that the milk they use in typical freeze drying is probably not the best milk that's out there. So it was super smart. Another thing that he did that I thought was really interesting is you can see every drink that he poured, he weighed. This one's tricky. I think you'd almost have to ask Anthony, because I would wonder what happens if he's over or under, because you would have to add more to, if you're under, you'd have to add more milk, which could affect your latte art. So part of me wonders if it is actually more just showing the judges that he has complete control and complete mastery over what's going on. It's one of those things, you see this often in barista comps, where if you have figured something out, but the judge doesn't know that you figured it out, they might think that you haven't. So often for something like if you have a thick liquid for your signature drink, you pour it out and the judge sees that some is stuck in there, they are going to write on your score sheet, or quite possibly write on your score sheet, you didn't account for the stuff that was stuck inside the pitcher. And so in your speech, you have to say, oh, just so you know, there's some left over. I added more. We're all good. So part of me wonders if that scale there is just to give that judges that additional bit of confidence that Anthony has figured out every part of this presentation. You can see him clearing the menus for the judges here. This is another like really smart, nice little touch. You can actually instruct bussers to remove that. So a volunteer would come, they'd take it from the judge and move it away. By Anthony doing it himself, I think the customer service on it is really, really good. Also in this shot, you can see that everything that Anthony has built also has a little bit of an under compartment. So the cryodesiccated milk was underneath the judge's little stand there. All his ingredients are in that box. These are really nice things to do because they give the judges better sight lines, and they also let you have a bit of theatrics so that something is hidden until you decide to show it. So I think it's a really nice touch. It's really smart, and it just makes for a super clean presentation.
So inspired by the concentration of flavor and texture that we achieved through cryo-desiccating the milk, please slide down to the signature drink section of your score sheet once more, because we're going to represent this by adding 5 grams of cryo-desiccated date syrup. Now I prepared this syrup by combining 1 part date with 1 part water and sous videing for 3 hours at 60 degrees to highlight the natural flavors of this ingredient. Similar to your milk blend, I've then cryo-desiccated that syrup, doubling the concentration of flavor and intensity. This is going to create a flavor note of sweet toffee in your signature course. And now, let's move on to your signature drink. So my goal today was to build trust through the key decisions I've made to deliver upon my descriptors in each course. Today, we've introduced 4 of those decisions, inspired by them 4 ingredients that have led to the 4 flavor notes I've just given you of plum, sultana, cranberry, and sweet toffee. Now this is all represented on the placemat in front of you. Now here, I've got 1 double espresso of the milk extraction, the cryo-desiccated date syrup, and the cold brewed hibiscus tea. I've nitrogen flushed it and held it on a hot water bath, and this is going to highlight a nectar-like texture in this drink, if you please write that down. Now over here, we've got 1 double espresso of the espresso extraction. We've got the lacto-fermented passion fruit and the Colombian honey. Now I've been using this magnetic stirrer to mix the ingredients whilst heating and aerating the drink. This is going to highlight sweetness and articulation in your signature drink. Now, just like your espresso course, I'll be serving this drink at a temperature of 50 degrees with an aromatic disc to capture the aromatics, giving more prominence to the flavor notes I've just given you.
So one thing you can see that Anthony also did is that he used pieces of equipment throughout the presentation that were sort of preparing the ingredients and sort of just holding them at temp. So he had that magnetic stir, he has the sous vide that's heating something, and this is a great way to get some points. One of the things judges want to see is they want to see the signature drink prepared on stage. So nowadays they're complicated enough that most signature drinks are people have a bunch of liquids, they pour it in, they mix it together, and they serve it. And so by Anthony having these tools that are slightly automated, but he still has to interact with, it is showing that he's building that drink in front of the judges. It's the same thing in a restaurant where if you order your food and it comes out immediately, you're going to wonder about it. By Anthony actually putting on a bit of a show and preparing each ingredient, his score is going to go up and it's going to be a better experience for the judges.
I'll ask you to wait until I call time before assessing the drink. And when I do, please remove the disc, swirl for 3 seconds, and enjoy across 3 sips. Now, as I said at the beginning, every cup of coffee we make is a promise. All my experience in this industry means nothing if I don't use it to create trust and connect with people. So I really hope that you all feel I've delivered upon my promises today and created a level of trust that has brought the 5 of us closer together, because moments like this right here are so important for the progression of this amazing industry that we are all a part of. So please, please enjoy. Time.
Really lovely presentation. A couple big idea things that I think Anthony did really well. So there's one key one that I always talk about, is that presentations can be really specific to a coffee. And in that case, everything depends on that coffee tasting good, on it arriving okay, on it being roasted well. And then there's some presentations that are more a general framework that you can insert a really beautiful coffee into. And so I think that this El Diviso, obviously they have a great relationship with that producer, but you could find another producer that you have a great relationship with. And I think these are often some of the most successful presentations because they allow you to select just the best coffee. If you have a presentation that it really relies on a specific farm with a specific variety, unless that really turns out really, really well, there could be a better coffee out there that you maybe should have competed with. So I think the bones of Anthony's presentation are really, really good. The other thing that I think is super interesting is that his presentation style, he had an overarching theme, but then he often came back to just the different areas of the coffee chain. So he started at the farm, he talked about processing, he talked about roasting, he talked about what he did with the milk. And so these presentations, they look the most simple because basically you have your theme and then you reference one step along every stage, but they are extremely hard to do because they are sort of basic. And it's one of those things where I think some of the most simple things are the hardest to do. And so what Anthony did is he took a great theme, trust. He had all his movements orchestrated so that this presentation is extremely complicated, but it does not look extremely complicated. And then he fit every single block along the chain, which allows the judge to really follow along and know that you have ticked all the boxes and that you are showing that you either have mastered that level of the coffee chain, so being a barista, or you understand or know people that are going to handle that for you, whether it's your roaster or your producer. So Anthony just put together an amazing presentation. I think the way he displayed things, the magnetic menus, all these little things that are sort of new, at least to what I've seen, made for a really interesting presentation that was also super comfortable and super warm. He did a great job and it shows in his trophy. Hope you liked the video and me sort of talking and breaking down this presentation. If you would like to see more or there's a certain presentation you'd like us to watch and commentate on, just throw a little message below and we'll get to it.